I show you this picture, which is upstairs in one of the rooms. It's called Pair of Interiors. And I show it to you because it was set off by my fascination about the very idea of resemblance. As you probably will see if you've seen the exhibition, the couple, which occupy the same room and are wearing the same outfits at more or less the same time of the evening, are not in fact the same people. I chose them because they resembled each other. Resemblance doesn't mean identity or really looking like another person. It just means resembling them in some way. I'm sure you've all had the experience of being somewhere and seeing someone whose eyebrows or shape of their head or the way they walked reminded you of someone else, strangely and inexplicably, even though they don't really look like that person. And that's a kind of a fascination, it's sort of an elemental fascination. And I think I mentioned in my note on this picture that somehow it always reminds me that the human species emerged apparently from a common ancestor, which means that at some point we all really must have resembled each other even more than we do now. This one, The Thinker, which was made in '86, and another one, neither of these are, again, the kind of direct photographs that the photograph that Pine on the corner is. They involve other activities, other work. An Eviction, made in the '80s. I noticed that in assembling this room, the overall view of the city, this city, but in a sense any city, ended up being very strongly stating the themes of betrayal, the stab in the back, and expulsion. Two very rather severe themes. Between rooms, I noticed, as I saw the exhibition myself, that the theme of expulsion appeared in another work, a few rooms down. This is the final panel from my Italian picture, The Gardens, which was made in 2017, so 30-some years after the eviction. And so it fascinated me that there are thematic elements that run through what I'm doing without me often being aware of them. And they are on the level of what I might be concerned about, that is on the subject level, in this case, this elemental condition of expulsion. Another room features the picture I made of the Afghanistan War, Dead Troops Talk, made in the early '90s, and it deals, of course, with war, violence, etc. But it really began from a feeling of wondering what it would be, what the conversation would be like if you could listen to someone who had been annihilated under some circumstance for a possibly complex and obscure reason, and you could get their commentary on what happened to them. Sort of a dialogue in the afterlife, where people who served a cause for which they might not have even believed in, were sacrificed for that cause, and had turned out to have something to say about it. I wanted to imagine what they had to say about it. That was the aim of the picture. And the silence of photography, which is, I think, on a formal level, even though it seems often overlooked, on the formal level, the exclusions of a medium are extremely important in defining what that medium is. And for some reason, partly for that reason, I've always been interested in what escapes the photograph, what can't be perceived, what can be sensed but can't be perceived. And of course, sound and speaking is part of it. And that brought me around to a picture in another room, which was made another 10 years later, after Invisible Man by Ralph Ellison, which is one of the few pictures I've made, starting from from a literary work, by an existing literary work. And it also inherently contains a date, the date on which the novel was either written or published, which would be somewhere around 1954. So, although there's no date in my title, the title of the novel itself contains. It got brought together for me when I started looking at the exhibition. So that's sort of one little thread, or just a couple of little threads. Another one can start off from The Storyteller, which was made in the 80s, and which I see, it's at the very end of the, as you've probably seen, you come through the exhibition through a series of rooms, and at the end of that series you'll see the storyteller facing you on the end wall, and then you turn around and come back the other way and see a different sequence of rooms. And Martin and I wanted it there because in a way it states a lot of the basic themes and attitudes that run through a large part of the show. We discussed it in terms of the pastoral, the idea of the pastoral, which is an English word, and you may have, I'm not sure what the corresponding word is, but what that really, it's an ancient literary, very antique literary modus or genre, which always deals with, one, the relation between the living and the afterlife, but also between nature and civilization, and how one lives in nature and how one lives in civilization, and what the conflicts are and how they get resolved or how they get balanced or whatever. So clearly it has to do with gravity, which I got very interested in when I did this picture in 2010, and then kind of reprised in a different way a few years later, with the effort going in the opposite direction with Weightlifter, which is in another different room. You know, we don't see gravity. We don't see the air either, unless there's something in it. We don't see gravity, but you know, you're all in your seats because of an enormous pull of the Earth's center on you, us, that are keeping us where we are. And as soon as we put ourselves in the position to be in the wrong place, gravity acts very quickly. And this little boy, clearly climbing in the tree because it's his in the back of his yard, having a nice time, made some little misstep, and gravity is doing its work. The picture was based on something I experienced as a kid, falling out of a tree, and I'm sure most of the people in the room have probably fallen out of a tree at some point or fallen somewhere. So it's a kind of a subject that I like very much because it's simple, and everyone can relate to it. I'm not trying to be popular in my work, and I think a lot of my work is not very popular. It might be liked, but it's not very popular. I'm not trying to be popular, but I'm not trying to be unpopular. But these things are neither one or the other. They're just evident. They're open to anything, and they contain a lot of meaning, but they contain a lot of feelings and associations. And for me, it just depends on what one does with it. Anyway, it began from this memory, and the memory occurred and allowed me to recognize this sort of fascination with these invisible forces. And I think invisible forces are playing their roles in pretty much everything I do. In the 80s, large photography emerged as a sort of a phenomenon in the world and in the art world for various reasons, and I was part of it, of course. And I knew that, and I have reasons for wanting to make my pictures larger, and it has a lot to do with the freedom of scale that painting has had for centuries. A freedom of scale that allows things to be seen in a lot of different ways. But one of the things that the larger photographs can do is provide a kind of astonishing level of detail. And what's really charming about photographic detail that is not possible in any other pictorial form is that it's effortless. The camera takes care of the detail automatically. Whereas if you're trying to paint a highly detailed picture, and some great pictures have been painted that way, obviously many, it's very laborious. And the laboriousness of the achievement of detail is distracting. If you look at, say, Dürer's Rabbit, Hair by Dürer, which is a great example of near photographic handwork, it's great for what it is, but from a photographic point of view, it sort of has a laborious quality about it, a beautiful laborious quality. But what happened in the 80s, partly because of some things I said that I probably shouldn't have said in the way I said it, was that people got the idea that every picture I did was making a reference to some modern or pre-modern painting. And that is not my relation to painting. And I don't do that. Most of these pictures have no specific connection to any previous work. The only connection they could have to previous works is that since I've been about 12 years old, I've been looking at works of art super seriously and super passionately, continually. And so I have an encyclopedia, let's say, a very large encyclopedia of things I've really admired and almost memorized. I mean, many. So obviously my sensibility was formed by paintings, but also photographs, films, literature, etc., not just by 19th century French paintings. But I'm just going to finish to take it one step past this obvious gravity relation and bring it back to this, which is a picture made many years ago, one of the earliest pictures in the show, Milk, which shows, well, obviously shows the milk exploding, and I see this unpremeditated, spontaneous action as really the kind of link between this very old and very recent picture, this completely unpremeditated action that wells up out of some part of this person's consciousness or unconscious in one way or the other, or some combination of the two, and creates an unexpected moment and an unexpected form. I never want to do something I've done before, and to some extent I will claim that I have succeeded in that, because in the Legion is not milk done again. But there's something there that happened without doing milk over again, which I had never, I obviously had no intention of doing. So seeing exhibitions for me has that outcome. I hope it has also the outcome for other people, but of course it'll be different for them than it is for me. Okay, I'm going to stop there. Thank you.